April 16, 1945. A forest bordering the Oder River, east of Berlin. The world is ending in thunder. The ground shudders, a constant, deep-seated tremor that travels from the soles of your boots, up your legs, and into the hollow space in your chest. For 19-year-old Luftwaffenhelferin Hanne Schmidt, this is the only reality that remains. The pre-dawn blackness is torn apart by flashes of searing white light on the horizon, the opening barrage of Marshal Zhukov's final apocalyptic offensive. The sound is not a series of explosions, but a single, continuous roar, the sound of a giant tearing the sky in half. Hanna is huddled in a hastily dug trench, the lip of it crumbling with each concussive blast. The air is thick with the smell of pine sap, cordite, and damp, cold earth. She clutches the stock of a Karabiner 98K, a rifle that feels absurdly heavy and foreign in her hands. 6 months ago, she was plotting aircraft trajectories on a glass map in a command bunker near Dresden. Now, she is infantry. Everyone is infantry. Old men from the Volkssturm with shaking hands, Hitler Youth boys whose steel helmets seem to swallow their heads, and the handful of exhausted, hollow-eyed Wehrmacht veterans who try to shout orders that are instantly devoured by the cacophony. Her communications unit, the 7th Signals Auxiliary, had ceased to exist 3 days ago, shattered and scattered during the retreat. Now she belongs to Kampfgruppe Richter, a designation for a ghost, a collection of survivors thrown together to plug a hole that is rapidly becoming a chasm. A cascade of dirt and pine needles rains down as a shell lands closer than the last. Hanna flinches, pressing her face into the damp wall of the trench. Her fingers are numb, her uniform soaked through with a chilling mixture of sweat and morning dew. The order to hold at all costs feels like a bitter joke. Hold what? This patch of shivering earth? This last desperate line before the capital? The very air vibrates with the engine growl of hundreds, perhaps thousands of Soviet T-34 tanks, a sound that gets louder with every passing minute. It's a low, metallic grinding that seems to come from beneath the ground itself, a promise of inevitable annihilation. Sie kommen! The shout is thin, reedy. One of the boys, no older than 16. Panzer! Hanna risks a glance over the edge of the trench. Through the splintered trees, she sees them. Dark, hulking shapes lurching through the morning mist, their long cannons sniffing the air. One of them pivots, and its coaxial machine gun spits a stream of orange tracers that rip through the tree line, shredding branches and turning ancient pines into splintered stumps. The Wehrmacht veteran next to her, a Feldwebel whose face is a mask of grime and exhaustion, hefts a Panzerfaust. He doesn't say a word, just gives a grim, almost imperceptible nod. This is the moment. The world dissolves into chaos. The crack of rifles, the frantic, high-pitched burp of an MG-42, and the deafening roar of the Soviet tanks answering back. A shell screams overhead and detonates behind their position, a geyser of earth and metal. Hanna feels a violent, sharp sting in her right thigh. She cries out, a sound swallowed by the maelstrom. She looks down. A dark stain is spreading across the field gray wool of her trousers. It's not a direct hit, just a piece of shrapnel, a hot sliver of steel from the earth-shattering blast. There is no time for pain, no time for anything but fear. The Feldwebel fires the Panzerfaust, a streak of fire, a satisfying clang of metal on metal, but the T-34 barely slows, its tracks churning the forest into a muddy pulp. It keeps coming. Then, a new sound, a different kind of engine, a different kind of weapon. The unmistakable chatter of American machine guns from their flank. A voice, amplified by a bullhorn, bellows in accented German. Legen Sie Ihre Waffen nieder. You are surrounded. Lay down your weapons. Americans. They had broken through from the west. The Russians from the east. They are caught, squeezed in a vise of steel. For a moment, no one moves. The idea of surrender is as unthinkable as survival. Then the Feldwebel slumps over, a neat, dark hole in his helmet. The boy who screamed Panzer is gone, his position now a smoking crater. The fight drains out of the forest, replaced by an eerie silence punctuated by the clicking of cooling tank engines and the moans of the wounded. Hands, empty and trembling, begin to rise from the trenches. Hannah feels a strange numbness spread through her body. The pain in her leg is a dull, insistent throb. She lets the heavy rifle slip from her fingers, its wooden stock clattering against a rock. She looks at her hands, caked in dirt and grime, and slowly, shakily raises them into the cold, unforgiving air. The war, for her, is over, but the ordeal has just begun. The first 48 hours of captivity are a blur of motion and exhaustion. Hannah is herded with the other survivors, a ragged collection of faces, young and old, all wearing the same vacant expression of shock. American soldiers, GIs from the 9th Army, move with an unnerving efficiency. They are tall, well-fed, and their uniforms are clean. They seem like beings from another world. They shout orders in a language that sounds harsh and alien, using hand gestures to move the prisoners into lines, to strip them of any remaining personal effects, a photograph, a letter, a pocket knife. The pain in Hannah's leg has now sharpened into a constant, biting ache. She limps, trying her best to hide it, a deep-seated instinct for survival screaming at her not to show any weakness. A weak animal is the first to be left behind. They are marched for miles to a collection point, a muddy field where thousands of German soldiers are already gathered, a vast gray sea of defeated men. The shrapnel wound in her thigh burns. She dares not look at it, terrified of what she might find. During a brief stop, she tears a strip of cloth from the inside of her tunic and, under the cover of the milling crowd, quickly wraps it around her thigh, pulling it tight. The pressure offers a fleeting moment of relief, but soon the fabric is soaked through with a warm, sticky wetness. A fever begins to creep into her body, a low-grade chill that has nothing to do with the damp April air. From the field, they are loaded onto Opel Blitz trucks, crammed in so tightly that it's impossible to sit. The journey is a jarring, rattling ordeal over shell-pocked roads. Every bump sends a fresh wave of agony up her leg. She grits her teeth, focusing on the gray, weeping sky, on the ruined villages they pass, on anything but the fire consuming her limb. Her body is rigid, her muscles clenched against the pain and the constant jostling. She has not truly relaxed a single muscle in days, perhaps weeks. Her body has become a prison of tension. The trucks deliver them to a railway siding where a long train of cattle cars waits. The doors are thrown open and the prisoners are forced inside. The stench hits first, a foul mixture of unwashed bodies, stale sweat, and human waste. They are packed into the darkness, the heavy doors sliding shut with a deafening boom, plunging them into near-total blackness. There are no windows, only thin slats near the roof that let in slivers of gray light and a breath of air. The train lurches into motion. This, Hannah thinks, is what it must feel like to be buried alive. Days and nights merge into one indistinguishable period of suffering. There is no sanitation. The floor is slick with filth. Water is passed in through a small hatch once a day, never enough. Food is a lump of hard bread. Men weep, some pray, others stare into the darkness, lost in their own private hells. Hannah finds a corner, huddles into herself, and tries to disappear. The fever is worse now. It comes in waves, leaving her shivering and then sweating, her thoughts becoming murky and confused. The wound on her leg is no longer just a source of pain. It is a malevolent presence, a core of heat that seems to sap all of her strength. The makeshift bandage is a sodden, useless rag. She knows with a terrifying certainty that it is infected, but to speak of it, to draw attention to herself, feels like a greater risk. The guards are faceless, armed men. The other prisoners are strangers, hollowed out by their own misery. There is no one to trust. She forces herself to stand when she can, to move her legs, terrified they will stiffen completely. But the effort is monumental. The muscles in her right leg are knotted, seized up in a permanent state of defense against the agony in her thigh. Even her good leg feels heavy, leaden. The constant standing, the swaying of the train, the endless tension, it's all contributing to a creeping paralysis. She feels as though her body is turning to stone. During one long, shuddering stop, she hears voices outside, American voices. The doors are opened and blinding daylight floods the car. They have arrived. She stumbles out into the light, blinking, disoriented. Before her stretches a vast city of canvas tents and watchtowers, all enclosed by endless rows of barbed wire. This is Rheinweisenlager, a temporary enclosure, a processing camp. As she is shoved into another line, a new peculiar sensation registers through the fog of her fever. She tries to walk normally, to place one foot in front of the other, but her legs feel strangely disconnected from her will. They move stiffly, awkwardly. When she comes to a halt, she realizes with a jolt of panic that she cannot bring her feet together. Her legs remain slightly, stubbornly apart, held in place by muscles that will no longer obey. The camp at Remagen is a universe of mud and despair. Spring rains have turned the vast open fields into a quagmire that sucks at the boots with every step. There is little shelter from the elements, just enormous, fenced-in pens where tens of thousands of German prisoners are held. Hannah is separated from the men and directed towards a smaller, segregated compound for female staff, nurses, and auxiliaries. The process is impersonal, methodical, and deeply humiliating. It is designed to strip away every last vestige of their former identities. They are no longer soldiers or signals operators, they are numbers. First comes the delousing. They are marched into a large tent filled with thick, acrid smoke from DDT powder sprayers. GIs in masks and goggles direct them through the fog, the white powder settling on their hair and uniforms, a ghostly film that smells of chemicals and disease. Hannah's fever makes the air feel thick and suffocating, and she fights the urge to gag. The pain in her leg is a constant, throbbing drumbeat, a rhythm to which her entire existence is now timed. Her strange inability to bring her legs together has become more pronounced. She walks with a stiff, slightly wide gait, a movement she tries to conceal, but which requires immense concentration. Every step is a negotiation between her will and her rebellious body. Next is registration. A long, slow-moving line snakes towards a series of wooden tables set up under a canvas awning. A tired-looking American officer sits at one, a translator at his side. When her turn comes, she stands before him, trying to keep her posture straight, to betray none of the agony that is consuming her. Name, the translator asks, his German flat and bored. Hannah Schmidt. Rank and unit. Luftwaffenhelferin, 7th Signals Auxiliary. The American officer, a captain by the eagles on his collar, makes a note on a clipboard. He doesn't look at her, just at the paper. To him, she is just another line of text. He gestures for her to move on. As she turns, her leg gives a violent, involuntary twitch, and she stumbles. The captain glances up, his eyes narrowing for a fraction of a second. It's a flicker of professional curiosity, nothing more. This is Captain Thomas Riley of the U.S. Army Medical Corps. His job today is triage, to quickly scan the incoming prisoners, separating the gravely wounded who need immediate attention from the thousands of others suffering from malnutrition, exhaustion, and minor ailments. He sees the stumble, notes her pallor, and the slight sheen of sweat on her forehead. But in the overwhelming sea of human misery, she does not yet register as a priority. He has seen hundreds like her today. Hannah catches her balance, her face flushing with shame. She forces herself to walk away, each step a carefully controlled movement. The brief interaction has filled her with a new dread. She was noticed. In this place, being noticed is dangerous. She is given a small metal tag with a number stamped on it and directed towards the women's enclosure. The days that follow are a monotonous cycle of roll calls, meager rations of soup and bread, and endless waiting. The infection in her leg is now a raging fire. The area around the shrapnel rillant is swollen, hard, and hot to the touch. A dark discoloration is spreading beneath the skin. At night, in the crowded, cold tent she shares with dozens of other women, she lies on a thin straw pallet, shivering with fever, her teeth chattering uncontrollably. She bites down on her lip to keep from crying out. The muscles in her legs are now locked in a permanent, rigid spasm. It is no longer just her right leg. The strain has spread to her left as well. A sympathetic cramping born of weeks of guarding the injury, of unnatural postures, of sheer nervous exhaustion. She discovers the true horrifying extent of her condition one afternoon while trying to find a more comfortable position on the hard ground. She is lying on her back, and she tries to draw her knees together. She can't. Her legs remain splayed apart as if held by an invisible force. A cold, terrifying panic washes over her. She concentrates, pouring all of her will into the simple action. Close, just close. Nothing. The muscles are like iron bands, unresponsive to her commands. They are her legs, a part of her body, but they are no longer hers to control. She can force them to walk, to stand, but the simple, relaxed motion of bringing them together is impossible. It is a bizarre, intimate, and deeply frightening paralysis. She hides this new horror as she has hidden the wound, wrapping herself in her thin blanket, turning towards the canvas wall of the tent. To show this weakness, this bizarre affliction, feels like the ultimate surrender, a loss of control so profound she cannot bear for anyone to see it. But the fever is relentless, and her strength is fading. She knows, with a sinking finality, that she cannot hide forever. 2 weeks into her internment, Hannah's body betrays her. During the morning roll call, a wave of dizziness, hot and absolute, washes over her. The world tilts, the sea of gray-clad women and the gray sky above spinning into a nauseating vortex. She sways on her feet, her legs, those rigid, uncooperative stilts, finally failing her. She collapses, not with a sudden crash, but in a slow, crumpling heap into the cold mud. The commotion is immediate. Other women cry out. A guard barks an order. 2 medics with a stretcher appear, their boots squelching in the mire. They lift her, her body feeling strangely light, disconnected. As they carry her away from the crowded compound, she hears the whispers of the other prisoners, a mixture of pity and fear. She has become what she dreaded most, a problem. She is taken to the medical station, a large tent distinguished from the others only by the red cross painted on its canvas flap. Inside, the air smells sharply of antiseptic, a clean, sterile scent that is a world away from the filth of the camp. There are a dozen cots lined up, most of them occupied by women suffering from dysentery, pneumonia, or infected wounds. Hannah is placed on an empty cot at the far end of the tent, a thin wool blanket pulled over her. A nurse checks her pulse and places a cool, damp cloth on her forehead. The simple act of kindness is so unexpected that it almost brings tears to Hannah's eyes. An hour later, Captain Thomas Riley walks into the tent. His face is etched with fatigue, his uniform rumpled. He has been on his feet for 16 hours, dealing with a typhus scare in one of the men's compounds. He picks up a chart from the nurse's small wooden desk and walks over to Hannah's cot. He recognizes her, vaguely, the girl who stumbled in the processing line. The chart is sparse. Female, approx 20 years old, collapsed at roll call, high fever, suspected exhaustion and malnutrition, standard for this place. He stands beside the cot, looking down at her. Her face is pale and slick with sweat, her eyes closed. "Can you understand English?" he asks, his voice gentle but weary. Hannah's eyes flutter open. They are cloudy with fever, but lucid. "A little," she whispers, her voice a dry rasp. "I'm Captain Riley. I'm a doctor. I need to examine you. What's wrong? Where does it hurt?" Pride, even now, wages a war with desperation. She wants to say she is just tired, that she needs rest, but the fire in her leg and the terrifying paralysis in her muscles have finally broken her will. "My leg," she says, the words barely audible. "My right leg." Riley nods. "Okay, let's take a look." He pulls back the thin blanket. She is still wearing her uniform trousers, now caked with dried mud and stained with something dark. "I'll need to cut these off." He gestures to a nearby orderly, who brings a pair of trauma shears. With a few quick snips, the thick wool fabric is cut away from her calf to her upper thigh. Riley's professional demeanor falters for a second. The leg is grossly swollen, the skin a mottled patchwork of angry red and a deep, bruised purple. The makeshift bandage she had wrapped around the wound weeks ago is now embedded in the swollen flesh, a filthy, pathetic strap across a limb ravaged by infection. "My God," Riley murmurs under his breath. He gently prods the tissue around the wound. Hannah lets out a sharp, involuntary hiss of pain, and her entire body goes rigid. "Sorry," he says, his voice softening. "I need you to try and relax your leg for me. I need to see how deep this goes." Hannah stares at the canvas ceiling of the tent. She understands what he is asking. It is a simple, reasonable request. She tries to comply. She sends a message from her brain to the muscles of her legs. Relax, let go. But nothing happens. The muscles remain locked, as hard as wood. If anything, her attempt to relax them only seemed to make them tighter. "I can't," she says, her voice trembling. Riley frowns, a flicker of impatience crossing his face. He's seen this before, fear and defiance. Prisoners who resist treatment out of spite or terror. He picks up a chart, his tone a little firmer. "I can't help you if you fight me. Just let the leg go limp." Tears well up in Hannah's eyes, tears of frustration and utter helplessness. He doesn't understand. He thinks she is being difficult. The shame of her body's betrayal, of this bizarre, inexplicable condition, is overwhelming. She looks at him, her eyes pleading. How can she explain something she doesn't understand herself? How can she describe this internal prison? The words come out in a broken whisper, a confession of a reality so strange it sounds like madness. "I am trying," she says, a single tear tracing a path through the grime on her cheek. "I cannot. Why won't my legs close?" The question hangs in the sterile air of the medical tent, utterly confounding. Why won't my legs close? It is not a question of defiance. It is not a plea for sympathy. It is a genuine, desperate inquiry into a physiological mystery that has been tormenting her. Captain Thomas Riley freezes, the shears still in his hand. His medical mind, trained to interpret symptoms and diagnose disease, struggles to process the words. He looks from her tear-streaked face down to her legs. He sees it now, clearly. They are splayed at a slight, unnatural angle, a V-shape that she is clearly not maintaining by choice. The muscles of her thighs are visibly knotted, bunched up like cords of wood beneath the skin. This isn't resistance. This is a pathological state. In that moment, she ceases to be prisoner 3479. She ceases to be a Luftwaffenhelferin, a cog in the machine he has spent 4 years fighting. She is a young woman, sick and terrified, whose body has mutinied against her. The weariness falls away from him, replaced by a surge of clinical focus and a profound, unexpected wave of empathy. The war, with its clear lines of friend and foe, dissolves. Here, in this tent, there is only a patient and a doctor. "It's okay," he says, his voice now stripped of all authority, containing only reassurance. "It's okay. Don't try to force it. We'll figure this out." He puts the shears down and begins a more careful examination. He is no longer just looking at a wound. He is reading the story of the last few months of her life, written in the language of trauma upon her body. He sees the evidence of chronic stress in the rigid set of her posture. He sees the effects of prolonged marching and standing in the severe muscular contracture. He understands that her body, in a desperate attempt to protect the injured thigh, has locked itself into a permanent defensive posture. The nerves, inflamed by the raging infection and compressed by the swollen tissue, are screaming, sending a constant signal to the muscles: contract, guard, protect. The exhaustion has eroded her body's ability to override that signal. He gently peels back the filthy, embedded bandage. The stench of necrotic tissue and infection, a smell he knows all too well from the battlefield, fills the air. Beneath it is a festering wound, deep and purulent, with the jagged edges of a small metal fragment still visible within. The infection is not localized. It has spread, causing severe cellulitis throughout the entire thigh. This is what is fueling the fever, poisoning her system, and causing the neurological chaos in her limbs. He realizes with a sickening jolt the sheer, unimaginable willpower it must have taken for her to walk on this leg, to stand for hours at roll call, to endure the cattle car, to hide this agony for weeks behind a mask of stoic pride. She hadn't been stumbling in the processing line because she was clumsy. She had been stumbling because she was fighting a war inside her own body, and she was losing. His mind races through the protocol. Sepsis is the immediate threat. The infection must be controlled, drained. The shrapnel has to come out. He needs to administer massive doses of the new wonder drug, penicillin, something the German army did not have in any significant supply. He needs to get fluids into her to fight the dehydration caused by the fever. He looks back at her face. Her eyes are watching her, filled with a fragile, tentative trust. The question still lingers in them. Why? He doesn't have the German words to explain tetany, nerve compression, or prolonged muscle splinting, but he can offer her the one thing she needs more than an explanation. "Your leg is very sick," he says slowly, choosing simple words. "The muscles, they are tight because of the sickness, to protect you. I am going to give you medicine, to fight the sickness, and to help the muscle sleep." He calls for the nurse. "I need 50,000 units of penicillin, stat, and an IV drip with saline. Prep her for surgical debridement. We need to clean this wound out now, or she'll lose the leg, maybe her life." The nurse hurries to obey. Riley turns back to Hannah. He takes the cool cloth from her forehead, dips it in a basin of clean water, and gently wipes the grime from her face. It is a gesture that transcends rank and nationality. It is simply one human being caring for another. He sees the faint lines of youth around her eyes, the ghost of the young woman she was before her world was consumed by fire and thunder. He had come to Europe to fight an ideology, to defeat an army. He had seen death and destruction on a scale that had numbed his soul. But here, in the quiet desperation of a single German girl, he finds himself face to face with the true, intimate cost of it all. The war isn't just fought in trenches and tanks. It is fought in the silent, stubborn cells of a human body, in the space between a command from the brain and a muscle that will no longer obey. The question she asked will stay with him for the rest of his life, a haunting reminder that the deepest wounds of war are the ones you cannot see.